Hey friends, happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. I am really excited to be hosting Roslyn Sieh with us today. I just want to, I'm so excited to host Roslyn. She is an amazing woman of God. I know her from the church world, and she's a mom of 11 kids. Not only is she a mom of 11, she's grandma to 14 and counting. And she has homeschooled all of her kids all the way through high school, graduated all 11 of them. And as a mom with 5 kids, I just love that somebody has been there, has done that, has wisdom to share. The Bible tells us in Titus 2 that the older women can help mentor and train the younger women in managing their households and loving their children well. And so I am just so thankful to have Roslyn on with us to share wisdom. Before I have Roslyn introduce herself and her family and we're going to start giving her questions. You guys, I encourage you guys, if you have any questions or comments, to put them up and we'll try to have Roslyn answer those. We are going to be only 30 minutes today because we're going to go pick up our son to take to a cross country meet. But I did get Roslyn to say yes, she will come on again. Hopefully we can get her scheduled again soon because I know that she has a lot of wisdom. But a funny story before I get Roslyn talking is that there was a conference that Nathaniel and I were ministering at. I was pregnant with my 4th baby, very pregnant, like ready to pop almost. And we were doing ministry, and this woman came up to us. Our other kids were still at home at that point. And she's like, "Oh, is this your first baby?" And I said, "No, actually, this is my 4th baby." And she goes, "Oh, but you seem so normal." And then it was like she caught herself. But I was just laughing. I'm like, what does that mean? That if you hit like number 4 and above for how many kids you have, then you enter the not normal category.
Weird now.
Or like moms with lots of kids just aren't all mentally there. I don't know. But really, I love big family. I love children. And honestly, if we could have had more than the 5 we have, I would definitely have more. But so Roslyn, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, your family, and maybe why you decided to have 11 kids.
Well, thank you for having me today. My husband Joel and I have been married for 45 years, and we have 11 children. Our oldest is 43. Our youngest is 20. So we finished our homeschooling journey 2 years ago when Hope graduated from high school. So I homeschooled for 34 years. What did you want me to? Oh, about ourselves. We live out on a little 6-acre homestead. We have some cows. We have some chickens. We have a lot of cats. We have a dog. My husband likes to garden, so we've always had a big vegetable garden and do the whole living off the land thing as much as we can. My kids have all of my children have graduated from college except the youngest one. And she has her associate's degree and is now doing an apprenticeship. So she's decided to go a little different route. But so
exciting.
How many boys, girls? What's your balance?
We have 7 boys, and 4 girls. So I always told the Lord that felt a little unfair.
Right.
We hear you on that one.
We have 4 boys and 1 girl. So, the energy level, every time you add another boy, it just like multiplies by 100, right?
We started having kids. I think we had 2 or 3, and I mean, our second born is a girl, but we had enough boys around that there was one night we went over to some friends who had like 7 kids and 6 of them were girls at the time. And it was bedtime. And we were like, we're the worst parents in the world because look how calm this bedtime is. And it's like, I mean, some of it maybe is just being in a later season of life and farther down the road, but it had a lot to do with it being girl dominated there. Yeah.
Well, out of our 14 grandchildren, I should get this right now, 4 granddaughters. So
wow.
I don't know what's going on here, but
boy energy. So our last podcast that we did last week, Friday, was actually called Raising Boys. And we were just talking about some of the differences between boys and girls and some of the things that boys do that girls don't. Anyway, if you want to catch our podcast or re-listen to this, you can listen at www.thehomemadefamily.com. You can listen on YouTube at just search for The Homemade Family, Nathaniel and Amy White. You can catch it anywhere podcasts are found. Search for Insight Now and look for The Homemade Family, or obviously on our Facebook pages also. Okay, Roslyn, beforehand, we were talking a little bit about homeschool and about just large family and the gift of family. Why don't you share with us like your journey into having 11 kids?
Okay.
What was the process?
Right. I'll try to keep it concise.
Right.
We had 4. We had 2 boys and 2 girls, and we thought, oh, that's perfect. And so we started talking about what are we going to do now? Are we going to do some kind of surgery and stuff? And neither my husband were like, nope, I don't want to do that. And my husband said, nope, I don't want to do that. You do it. No, you do it. And so, time went on. We had our 4th one was an unexpected pregnancy for us. So it was really where God started to transform our hearts, because all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we're not in control. And I went to the Mache conference that next spring, and the speaker was Michael Ferris from Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and he was giving this talk about how, well, we only had 6 kids at that point, but that was before we read Mary Pride's book, The Way Home. And my ears perked up, and I'm like, what's that? So I scoured all the vendors there until I found the book, and I brought it home, and I'm on the way home. I stopped for supper and I start reading the book. And by the time I get home, I told my husband, I think a bomb just exploded in our world. But she advocates the fact that God set it up that we were supposed to multiply and fill the earth. And he never rescinded on that. That was a command from the beginning of time. And then in Psalm 127, it talks about that, behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. The arrows, like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. And that scripture was really spoke to our hearts, because okay, children are a gift. They're a blessing. They're evidence of God's favor on you. Why would we turn the blessings of God away? And then, of course, over the years, we've had discussion with people, well, our quiver is small. I don't think we have room for more than 3 or 4. And I'm like, if you're going into battle, don't you want as many arrows as you can carry? And so,
that's good.
So, and then in Psalm 128, it says, your wife will be like a fruitful vine within your house, your children like olive plants around your table. Behold, for thus shall the man be blessed. And so it's an evidence of God's blessing in your life if you have children. And so we felt really convicted by God that we needed to give up control. And so we threw out whatever we were using for birth control and said, okay, God, we're willing. And it took me about 9 months to get pregnant the first time. And I'm like, oh no, we're not going to have any more kids. But God was faithful. I think he was just trying our hearts. And then in the decade of the 90s, I had 6 children. So we had one about every year and a half, maybe a little bit closer together that. And, when we started out, we're like, oh, we'll maybe have 6. God was faithful and he blessed us. In fact, Hope was born when I was 45. So wow. we had those 7 children in about 13 years. So,
yeah. Wow.
And would have wanted more, but kind of the clock ran out on that.
Yeah.
But that was how we ended up with so many.
That is a really beautiful story. Mm-hmm. So I know that kind of the narrative the world throws at stories like that is like, well, that's irresponsible. And, like, how did you manage that financially? And don't you know how much it is to raise a child in this day and age? And it's like, it'll throw back that fear of lack, fear of, like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. Or how did you guys process because I'm sure you asked those questions yourselves. Like, how do we know what we're doing? And what if we don't know what we're doing? And what if we can't afford this? And how do we fit all these kids in our house? And all of those kinds of things. So it just, because if this really is something that somebody listening to this is like, wow, this is maybe a bomb getting dropped in my world, then what could you say from your own testimony that can help answer some of those questions for them?
Well, we didn't have a huge income. My husband's not a doctor or a lawyer or anything like that. We had a pretty average income, and there were times it was, I'll be honest, that, we struggled to make ends meet. But we made the commitment to a one income family because I was homeschooling. And that meant, well, we didn't have a lot of vacations and we didn't go out and eat. And what we did, we kind of did here in the home. We didn't go out and do a lot of fun going to movies or anything like that because, taking 13 people to the movies was practically, half your grocery budget. But those were the things that we sacrificed because we felt like this was really important. And the Lord was really faithful to always provide. There were times where like, we really need, all my children had private music lessons and we had to provide instruments for all of them. Wow. And there were times where like, somebody needs a cello. That's going to be $1,500. We couldn't pay for that. And Lord was always faithful to come up with the ability to do that. So it was a faith walk in a lot of ways. But nobody starved. We all had plenty to eat. We probably all had too much to eat. And, we made it. So we just don't spend a lot of money on things that, the world would probably think is important. But
yeah.
Or what about activities? People
can see behind
like,
me.
Look at your book. Look at your library.
Right? Yeah. Like, so what about activities? And it's like, oh, but they need to be involved in this and that and the other, we talked about this a little bit ahead of time, but even just the thing that people say about homeschoolers, like, well, if they're not going to be well adjusted and not socialized enough, and what, how are they going to know to be able to follow their dreams if they don't get to go out for all the sports and all of those kinds of things?
Well, our kids kind of were pushed into music because that's my background. And we felt like if they were all in different sports things, it would be impossible to keep track of where they were all going and rehearse or practice here and practice there and games here and games there. It would have been insanity. So we kind of encouraged them all to do music as a way of learning personal discipline and all those things a lot of times you learn in a sports team, except it's a little bit more self-focused discipline, but they all took private lessons and then they all played in the orchestra. So they all went to the same kind of activity at the same time. And then they were all in the Mankato Children's Chorus. So they all went there together. We kind of did this as a group. And so it kept everybody kind of going in the same direction. So I didn't have everybody going in a million directions. I think that's one of the drawbacks sometimes of public schools, that you've got kids going here and there and everywhere. And even some homeschoolers, I've seen so many of them with their kids so busy doing so many things. And I don't, to me, that kind of takes away the whole purpose of being a homeschool, is that, we're never home if you're always running. So that was kind of how we did it. I know not being a sports is probably practically heretical for a lot of people, but we didn't do the sports, so that was it.
Well, yeah, I was just going to throw this out, and the thought comes to me, I think a lot of times part of the reason why parents do the activities is because we generally, if we would admit it, we don't even know how to connect with our own kids or how to have relationship outside of an event-based context, if that makes sense. Unless we're doing something together, we don't know how to just be together and have a conversation. And so I would just encourage parents to think through those kinds of things. Like, you want your kids to be socialized and know how to relate with people. Like, maybe we can start by learning how to relate with them. And that actually helps them learn how to relate as well. And then we don't need these things And I loved what you said about just, like the other things that people tend to say, well, they learn these things by being on a team. You guys, your kids got to learn that just by being part of family.
True.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, taking turns and helping one another and learning how to deal with conflict and a lot of things like that. Yeah. Yep.
So it seems like we've kind of transitioned into homeschool stuff. So I guess I'll ask you some questions about homeschooling.
Okay.
But why did you guys decide to homeschool? And then you shared some really fascinating things beforehand about your journey into homeschooling. Would you share that again?
Sure. Our oldest son birthday was in the middle of September, so he was not allowed to go to school when he was 5. He was not quite 5 and he didn't make the cutoff. And so that was when we were like, wow, that's not fair. What should we do? And then we heard Dr. Raymond and Dorothy Moore on the radio, Focus on the Family. And this was in 1985 and 1984, something like that. I mean, they were the real pioneers of the homeschool movement. And I heard them on the radio and I said to my husband, well, what do you think? And he's like, so we ordered a couple of their books, started talking about it. One of their first books was called Better Late Than Early, and they advocated that not pushing children into academics too early, especially boys, because they're not really ready to sit down and be quiet and listen, all that stuff. They need movement and stuff. And so that was kind of the very, very beginning. In 1985, the laws in Minnesota had just been struck down. There was the law that had been there before was declared unconstitutional. And so they were in the process of drafting another law about homeschooling.
The law said that originally the law said it was illegal to homeschool.
Right.
That was what was struck down. Okay.
Right. And then Homeschool Legal Defense was active in helping the law get developed here in Minnesota, as they were in all the states. And so we were homeschooling kind of undercover. And if I didn't let the kids go outside during the day when it was supposed to be school time, because I didn't want everybody wondering what was going on. And if we had to go to the grocery store or something during the day, invariably the cashiers would say, why aren't you in school? And my son would look at me with these big eyes like, what do I say? And if I said, well, we're homeschooling, they would say, is that legal?
Yeah.
And they would say, what about socialization? And so those were the two questions we got all the time. And so then there were pioneers that, forged ahead. I don't think people homeschooling today really appreciate the sacrifices that a lot of the early homeschoolers made to make it possible for everybody to homeschool. There were people in Nebraska that were actually thrown in jail for homeschooling their children. And so, we were really kind of in the very beginning of the whole thing. And it was really finding our way. We finally connected with a couple of other families in the region. I think we were the only one in our county at the time.
Wow.
And there was a couple like in Fairmont and I don't know, a couple other places. Anyway, we've kind of banded together and became a little support group. And then eventually there was one that started in Mankato, and that was lifeline for us because we desperately needed somebody else to help us figure this out, because we were all new at it. We really didn't know what we were doing, but we knew that this is what we felt God had called us to do. And so it was, we kind of clung together out of absolute desperation because we needed each other. Mm-hmm. And now I don't think it's nearly the same. We had deep relationships with those people, and some of them are still my good friends. And that was 30 years ago.
Wow.
So did you have any background in education or teaching before you took the plunge into starting to homeschool?
I do have a degree in music education. I can't really say that that's benefited me a whole lot as a homeschool mom, other than the fact that I kind of knew how to put lessons together. But,
Okay. Did you at any point feel like maybe you weren't smart enough to do this, or you didn't asking yourself, why am I doing this? What am I doing? Like, am I screwing up my kid? And then how did you overcome those feelings and thoughts?
Oh yeah. There were a lot of times I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. There were times I'm like, why am I doing this? Am I really making a difference? I think every parent who homeschools feels that way a lot of times. but I think it's a process of one day at a time, taking one step at a time. Everybody's got bad days. Even people who aren't homeschooling have bad days. And so knowing that, okay, today was not a good day, but we're going to step back. We're going to try again tomorrow. If things are just going all crazy, you're just like, fine, put the books away today. Let's go do something else. You know, it takes a while to be able to learn that freedom, to be able to say, okay, this isn't working today. Let's take a break. If you've got sick children, you know, we're not doing school today. It's okay. Mom's pregnant and laying on the couch, which I did a lot when I was pregnant. I homeschooled from the couch. You know, there's just, you know, it's a process and it's a lifestyle. So it's something you learn as you go. And it isn't like, you know, if you've been in public school, if you were raised in public school, everything's very cut and dried. This is the way it's done. And when it's a homeschooling lifestyle, it's you do life together, and education, academics is just part of that lifestyle. So did that answer your question? Did I say it the right? Did I answer it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was curious about something kind of similar. You know, you said you basically you started homeschooling because you felt your son was ready for it, but missed the cutoff, you know, but you wanted to get him started in some level of training and education. But I mean, you were homeschooling, you said, for 34 years. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So what kept you going? You know, that's what made you start homeschooling. But, you know, was it something in just the value system or habit, or what was it for you guys?
I think it was just our complete conviction that this is what we needed to do. I've had other people come to me and say, well, we're going to try homeschooling and see if it works. And I would look at them and say, no, you don't try homeschooling and see if it works, because I can guarantee you'll quit. You have to go in with the determination. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And that is really what helps get you through, because there's bad days, bad seasons. And the conviction that this is really God's best for us is what kept me going. So, because there's, you know, everybody has bad times, but we just kind of kept trudging ahead. So.
What was some of the fruit you saw as you went along that kept confirming that was the best God had for you?
Well, as our older kids got into like middle school age and stuff, we started really seeing a difference in their behavior compared to public school kids. And the fact that they could enjoy being with their younger siblings, and other children that age that had been in public schools really didn't want anything to do with the little kids. The whole, you know, how kids get when they get to that age. I think they still do that. You know, they get very snarky and very, you know, I don't know. Anyway, I always said I wasn't going to send anybody I loved to middle school, because middle school was a horrible experience for me. And I just decided, nope, I'm not doing that to my kids. And, you know, and then we started to see the fruits of, you know, being at home and being able to pursue their heart's delight instead of being put into the formulaic thing of public schools is what you have to learn. Because our second son is a musician. And by the time he was 13, he was practicing 2 hours a day. And by the time he was in high school, we were taking him up to the cities on Saturdays for youth orchestra up there. And now he plays with the symphony. But so, you know, we started to be able to channel, you know, what they wanted to do more specifically. And, you know, the relationships within the family. We had the older kids in relationships with the little kids. And this is a whole nother thing, but teenagers tend to be pretty self-focused and pretty, you know, the world is all about them. But when you have a large family in a 4-bedroom house, nobody gets their own room. So they have to share space with younger siblings. And so they don't get this little, this is my world entitlement kind of feeling. Plus, because we're a large family, we need a lot of help. They have to help care for the younger ones. And so that whole concept of having to be responsible for somebody else, and it isn't just all about me, I think really helped our teenagers become mature adults instead of wanting to play and entertain themselves. So
That's
Yeah.
great.
So it's our time is already up. Can you believe it? See, this is why you have to come on, because I got 500 more questions that I want to ask. I especially loved what you just said about you noticed that your teenagers were different than a lot of the public school teenagers. And I, at some point, really want to go into that because, you know, as Christian parents, we have really honestly amazing teenagers, but people still tell us like, just wait till they're teens and then you're going to see what happens. But I think
That's
it's
right.
different.
We will see what happens.
It's different, right? And so I would love to go into that more in our next one. But just as a parting shot, Roslyn, what would you say to encourage moms with young kids at home who are just feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now, or ones who are in the thick of homeschooling and feeling like how do I manage everything? Like, what is your encouragement for just getting through the day to day?
one of the things the Lord taught me when I was in that place was one day at a time. And it's always easy to look way ahead and go like, I'm never going to be able to do this. I can't keep doing this. And he just really said, focus on today. Focus on what has to be done today. Focus on what your child needs at this moment and not worry about how you're going to manage next week. And that really helped me because it was easy to feel overwhelmed that, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. And then it doesn't have to be perfect. Life is not perfect. And so, you know, things don't go well. It's okay.
Yeah.
Give yourself grace, give your kids grace, and, you know, one step at a time. One step forward, one step forward. And boy, before you know it, you look back and go, wow, how did we do that? And people ask me all the time, how did you do that? And I'm like, one day at a time, one step at a time. I don't even know. I can't even tell you, except for the fact that, you know, God was in it and we just did it one step at a time.
Yeah. So you graduated your youngest child. And what do you see in the next season?
Well, I'm pretty passionate about education, obviously. And I really feel like God has just recently laid it on my heart that we need to do something about the education system. The education mountain needs to be reformed in the image of the kingdom. And a lot of people are saying, well, yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. But it's going to be a generation before the education system is completely reformed. So God's really laid it on my heart that hopefully I'm going to be, you know, I'm trusting that he's going to find the way to do this, to start as a private school that gives a rigorous academic program, but also combines it with kingdom so that we teach our children identity and authority and teaching them to love their country and all the real history that our country is instead of all the garbage they're getting in the public school system. And I envision a school where we're raising up leaders because we're teaching them real solid academics, but we're also teaching them kingdom principles that are going to allow them to go forth into what God's called them to be. So I don't know if there's a model for that. I don't know if there's ever been a school like that anywhere else, but that's my passion. So that's what I feel like God wants me to do if somehow.
Yes.
Come on.
So I just love this. And, you know, a couple of years ago, I put a post out on Facebook just saying like, I just feel like I need to start a private Christian school. And, you know, I feel like the reason I said that is probably because there is this group of people who has a passion to reform the education mountain and into where we're really turning out leaders, like you're saying, and those carrying kingdom identity and purpose and coming with wisdom. And I know, like, I feel like our education system is really falling short in this season. If you talk to employers and business leaders at this time, the generation that's coming out is like not even prepared for the work world, which, you know, you think 10, 15, 20 years down the road, like, how is this going to impact our economy and things like that? Like, we could go into this, but we have to wrap up for time's sake. But I wanted to say that because if you feel this touching your heartstrings, our listeners here, and you want to know more about this, I invite you to shoot me a message on Facebook or Instagram And let's connect. Let's talk. I'll get you connected maybe with Roslyn. We just want to start dreaming of what God wants to do in reforming the education mountain and raising up leaders carrying kingdom identity and how that looks. Okay.
Yes.
So with that, Roslyn, thank you so much for joining us today. And listeners, thank you for joining us. We look forward to hosting Roslyn again so I can get the rest of the story. And then next time we're going to do a special 1 hour long segment. So, and
That'll
with
still
that,
feel too short, I'm sure.
that will still feel too short, I'm sure. But Roslyn, thank you so much
Yes,
for
thank
sharing
you.
some of your wisdom
Well-
and insights and your passion for family.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. It makes me feel important.
Yay.
You are. Very
You
much.
are. You're very much important. Okay. We
Thanks.
will catch you guys next Friday. Same time, same place. God bless you.
Bye-bye.